About 5 years before this Christmas, my dad met his then wife in Thailand, after years of being single following a messy divorce with my mom during my childhood. They married soon after meeting, and she moved to live with him in the US, though they often spent time in Thailand because she didn't like the winter cold here. So for most Christmases, they were in Thailand, but not this one. From day one, both my husband and I never liked her. We thought she was, quite frankly, odd and a piece of work. We didn't think she was mean or anything like that, just unsettling and creepy. She was quiet, kept her eyes down a lot, and very occasionally did inappropriate things, especially when my dad and I were busy, and it was just her and my husband around. Such as one time, according to my husband, when she offered him a banana from the fruit bowl, then slowly peeled it while maintaining eye contact with him, before taking slow, exaggerated bites with soft moans. Another time, while I nicked down the street to do grocery shopping, and my dad was working in the shed, I came home to find his wife wandering around in this short silk robe that kept slipping open. My husband was trying to watch the TV, but she kept finding reasons to drift between him and the TV. The moment she saw me in the doorway, she just smiled sweetly and said something about having just gotten out of the shower, like this was perfectly normal behavior. That year, my dad and his wife's problems had gone from bad to worse. My husband and I were visiting for the holidays. Dad confided all of his concerns to us, and we listened carefully, shared our opinions, and suggested that he might be better off without her. It turned out, though, he didn't need our convincing. He had already made up his mind a couple of months earlier, and had already met with a divorce lawyer. He was planning to serve her the divorce papers while we visited my mom on Christmas Eve. I couldn't help but smile, of course. He'd been laying out this entire plan down to the day of when to do it, then explained it to us purely for confirmation. What I was smiling about was that he'd already invited us into the house for the holiday weekend. We were going to be stuck in the crossfire after he served her the papers. All I could imagine was her quietly planning something sinister for us while we slept. Thanks, Dad. We spent the night at my dad's and left in the morning to visit my mom for the afternoon. My husband seemed antsy about leaving. I brushed it off, figuring nothing serious was likely to happen. How wrong I was. We had a nice afternoon at Mom's, but around 5 p.m., my husband insisted we head back to check on Dad. I thought he was being paranoid, but agreed just to ease his mind. When we pulled into the driveway, all the lights were off, except for a weird flickering in the upstairs window, like a TV was left on. The door was locked, which immediately set off alarm bells. Dad only locked it when he was out or asleep. His car was still there, in the driveway, and it was too early for him to be asleep. We knocked, called his phone, but got no answer. My husband tried the back door, which was usually unlocked for access to the garage, but it was sealed tight. He ended up breaking the small window panel next to it to reach in and unlock it. As soon as we stepped into the utility room, we saw blood seeping from under the lid of Dad's chest freezer. The blood had pooled on the concrete floor. My husband yelled, and I freaked out. I fully expected to find my dad dead inside. I nervously lifted the lid to find packages of raw meat stacked against one side, deliberately arranged so they would leak over the edge as they thawed. She must have turned off the freezer hours ago. The house was quiet except for a TV upstairs. We called out but got no answer. Walking through the house, we found the kitchen drawers open with everything pulled out. Their wedding photo was on the floor, broken, and she'd scratched out Dad's face. We rushed upstairs and found Dad handcuffed to his bed frame in his underwear, barely conscious. He'd been drugged with something, probably in his drink. After we got him free and somewhat coherent, We discovered his safe had been completely cleaned out. All the cash he kept for emergencies, his passport, Nan's old jewelry he'd saved for me, even his grandfather's watch, all gone. On the small desk, in the spare bedroom where my husband and I were sleeping, was a note. Not for Dad, but for my husband. It read, "When you want a real woman who knows how to have fun, here's where to find me," with her tie number scrawled underneath, followed by a lipstick kiss mark. There was a second page that just listed everything she'd taken, like some kind of twisted receipt. Dad was embarrassed, but eventually told us what happened. She'd made his favorite meal for lunch. Then after lunch, she had suggested they have one last time before the divorce. Said she wanted good memories to take with her. Then she handcuffed him as part of it, and everything went fuzzy after that. He actually laughed and said maybe he should have seen it coming. We never told him about the note that was left to my husband. Christmas was always a big event for our family. Each year, my mom would pick up my identical twin sister and me and take us to her house, where she lived with our stepfather. There's one year I still think about a lot, though, because something happened that I still can't get out of my head. I was 14 at the time, and even though my twin sister Tasha and I were usually okay with family stuff, this year was weird. My stepbrother Irving was back from his college out of state for winter break, and he was dating Lisa, the girl next door. We'd seen them both around plenty during holidays since Mom remarried 3 years ago. Lisa's family often came over, but something felt different about this visit. Over the next couple of days, I noticed Irving acting different around me. He kept trying to talk to me alone, which he'd never done before. I kind of liked it. I mean, I'd always thought he was good looking, and Tasha did too. We'd talk about it sometimes when we were alone. During the nights, I shared a room with Tasha on the second floor. From our window, you could see the old barn at the back of the property. During the day, when I was outside walking around, I'd catch Irving watching me sometimes. It made me feel special, even though I knew he was with Lisa. Irving had been extra nice to me since he got home for break, calling me sweetheart and finding reasons to talk to me alone. It was weird because he had Lisa, but I kind of liked the attention. On Christmas Eve morning, Mom made Tasha and me wear matching outfits, these red Christmas sweater dresses she'd bought us. She always did this on holidays, saying how cute we looked. Usually we hated it, but those dresses were actually pretty nice. That afternoon, I was in the kitchen helping Mom when I saw Irving and Tasha talking by the barn through the window. He had his hand on her shoulder, and she was smiling up at him. It made my stomach hurt seeing them together. When Tasha came back inside, she pulled me aside, all excited. She said Irving wanted to meet her at the barn later that night. She thought maybe he'd kiss her. I wanted to tell her she was being stupid. He was dating Lisa, plus he'd been nice to me all break, not her. But I just nodded, containing my jealousy. During Christmas Eve dinner, I noticed Irving watching me with a big smile, but then he'd turn and wink at Lisa. It was confusing. I wanted his attention to myself, though I knew that was wrong since he had a girlfriend. After dinner, Lisa went home to spend the evening with her family. That night, Tasha was acting weird before bed, checking her hair and putting on lip gloss. She didn't even change out of her sweater dress. She thought I was asleep when she got up around midnight. I watched her leave our room. After a few minutes, I went to the window and saw 2 figures walking toward the barn, hand in hand. The moonlight was bright enough that I could see it was Irving and Tasha. I tried to convince myself it was fine, that I was just jealous, but something felt wrong. I waited by the window, 20 minutes passed, and then I heard something. It sounded like Tasha yelling. I grabbed my coat and ran downstairs, not caring if I made noise. When I got closer to the barn, I could hear Irving telling her not to be scared, saying he promised he wouldn't hurt her, and how much she would enjoy her first time. Then I heard Tasha cry out my name. She sounded terrified. When I pushed open the barn door, Irving had her pressed against the wall. He was calling her by my name, telling her she'd been flirting with him since she arrived. Tasha was crying, saying she wasn't me, that she wanted to go back to the house. I shouted Irving's name. He spun around, still holding Tasha's arm. For a second, he looked confused, probably because we were still in our matching dresses. Then his face changed. He realized he'd gotten us mixed up. He'd thought Tasha was me the whole time. Tasha pulled away from him and ran to me. We went back to the house together. In our room, she told me everything. How when he'd talked to her at the barn earlier, he'd called her by my name. She said she liked him so much she hadn't corrected him. He'd told her to meet him that night. Said he had a special Christmas present for her. But in the barn, he'd gotten aggressive, touching her in ways she didn't want, saying things that freaked her out. We didn't tell anyone what happened. Nobody would believe us. Irving was the perfect stepson, and we were just the twins who visited on holidays. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, but he wouldn't look at either of us. Lisa broke up with him a week later. I don't know if she found out something or just sensed something was wrong. Now, when I think back to that Christmas, I feel sick. Irving had been watching me, wanting me all the time, but got us mixed up and went after Tasha instead. I wonder what would have happened if he hadn't made that mistake. If I would have acted the same way as Tasha, or if I would have been more open to his advances. Sometimes I wonder if Tasha blames me for what happened to her that night, since I was the one he really wanted. We don't talk about it anymore, but every Christmas, I can tell we're both thinking about that night in the barn. This was Christmas night back in 2016. If I'm not mistaken, it was a Sunday night. I went up to Bend, Oregon to be with my family for the holiday and stay with them for the week. I had plans to stay with my family from Wednesday prior to Wednesday following Christmas Day. I don't get much chance to visit them and hadn't been able to see them for Thanksgiving that year, as I was in Japan with work. Our family Christmas get-togethers aren't that big since our family is very spread out over the West Coast. It was just my folks, my big brother, his boyfriend, my girlfriend, and myself. The house is big enough to accommodate all of us, but only just. We had a lovely fire going in the fireplace, and as we do every Christmas, sat around and watched a Christmas flick. That year, I think we watched Home Alone for the umpteenth time. It is one of my favorite childhood Christmas movies. While watching the movie, we ate dessert, Christmas pudding with ice cream. Then after the movie finished, we played some board games while enjoying some eggnog, as we do every Christmas. My girlfriend and I helped Mom clean up the kitchen. Then, at around midnight, everyone started to get ready for bed. My brother and his boyfriend took one of the spare bedrooms. My girlfriend and I took the other spare bedroom. We both fell asleep quickly. It had been a really big couple of days, and we were both exhausted. I don't usually dream, but that night, I had a vivid, unforgettable one. Before I get into the dream, let me give you a quick layout of the house. The living room is massive, and the kitchen is also quite spacious. Both spaces are open plan, with no wall dividing them. The kitchen is set a fair distance behind the sofa, with a large dining table separating the two areas. Anyway, back to the dream. It was an odd one. It felt almost like I was astral traveling, but instead of somewhere exotic or interesting, I only made it as far as the living room. I was sitting on the sofa, watching the Christmas tree lights twinkle and soaking up the warmth from the fireplace. In reality, though, both the fire and the Christmas tree lights were out at that time. In the dream, I heard a crashing sound coming from the kitchen, like pots falling off the counter. I turned around and saw the silhouette of someone in the kitchen. The room was pitch black, except for a faint glow radiating through from the Christmas tree lights. Then suddenly, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The spare bedroom didn't have an ensuite, so I had to head to the main bathroom near the living room. I got up quietly, trying not to wake my girlfriend. I didn't want to risk waking anyone else up, so I kept the lights off. I figured the glow might seep under the bedroom doors and disturb someone. Instead, I used the torch on my phone to help me find my way through the dark living room. After I finished my business, I was heading back to the bedroom when my phone light caught something on the tile floor. It was a few pots, sitting there between the kitchen island and the dining table. I knew my girlfriend and I had left those out to dry earlier, by the kitchen sink on the island. Then I heard a creak in the floor coming from my dad's office, which is also at the back of the house, just off the living room, leading out to the backyard. I looked in that direction. I asked if someone was there, expecting my dad to respond, but there was no answer. Then I noticed a shadowy silhouette through the open doorway of the living room leading to the office. I tried to focus on the doorway, and the silhouette started moving. I yelled, asking who it was. Whoever it was left through the back door in my dad's office, and I heard it close behind them. My yelling had woken up basically all of my family, and they all came rushing in to see what the commotion was. I quickly explained what I had just witnessed. My dad, brother, and his boyfriend threw on shoes and jackets. Together, we ran out into the snow, looking around. We found a set of footprints in the snow leading into the woods, from my dad's office. It was like 3 a.m, and none of us were exactly eager to go into the woods following some unknown person's footprints. While Mom called the cops, my girlfriend and I stood by the back door, waiting for the police to arrive, staring into the cold, creepy silence of the pitch-black woods, where someone might have been hiding, maybe even watching us. My dad checked his office for anything stolen, while my mom and brother looked through the other rooms. But surprisingly, nothing of serious value seemed to be missing. When the police arrived, they followed the footprints into the woods as far as they could, but the trail eventually disappeared, and they found no one. I had a hard time falling asleep the following night. I wasn't so much unsettled about the intruder, as everyone else was, but at the realization that my dream had mirrored reality.